Thanks everyone and welcome to another IIBA Tools and Techniques Thursday. Our Tools and Techniques microclass for today is Design Thinking in Practice. And I just want to go through some quick rules and information. And then I will introduce Olu and he can take over. So firstly, if everyone could please stay on mute unless clear to talk. Switch off your videos. Only the presenter's video will be allowed. The presentation will run for about 45 minutes long. You may post your questions in the main chat. We will read them to the presenter when it's time for Q&A. Any questions that we do not get through during this session, Olu has kindly agreed to actually share the answers on LinkedIn for us. The presentations will be uploaded on IIBA SA's YouTube page, and I'll share the link for that. Unfortunately, we do not send out the presentation deck itself. To become a member of the IIBA South Africa, you need to go to iibasa.wildapricot.org/join-us, and I'll share that link in the chat as well. For our next event, please visit the IIBA South Africa's events page, and I'll share links for that. And if you want to join our awesome crew and would like to present a tool or technique to the community, please contact us at durban@southafrica.iiba.org. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope that you enjoy this presentation. So just a little bit background on Oluwakorede Asuni. Olu, as he's fondly called by colleagues, friends, and families, works at the intersection of technology and business. He has for many years assisted large corporations, small businesses, public sector organizations, and non-profit craft excellent technology adoption strategies. He's the business analyst lead for the mobile financial services unit of MTN South Africa, where he supports executives and key decision makers in expanding and growing the business. Olu is a member of the non-executive board of the IIBA South Africa chapter. His interests span stakeholder theories of business, new business models for businesses, ethics of information systems, and gamification. We'll also share Olu's contact information. He's kindly given us his email address, his website, and LinkedIn. I will add that to the chat as well. So Olu, thank you very much for taking your time to spend tonight with us, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Lalita. Feels very good to be here. Sorry, I jumped the gun earlier by attempting to introduce myself. Another tools and technique Thursday, and I hope that this one would be as beneficial as you have expected, and would also meet the standard that all the people who have spoken on this platform before me as established. So today I'll be talking about design thinking, lessons from the field. It's slightly different from what was advertised, and the responsibility is fully mine. I was going to speak about design thinking in practice, and I thought that I shouldn't just stop at expanding on what design thinking is and what practitioners think about design thinking, but to also bring to bear some of the lessons that I have learned as a practitioner. Design thinking is one of those things that means different things to different people. Pretty much like the problem of defining economics, different schools of thoughts abound. And some of them, while there are overlaps, in some instances, there are the definitions are divergent. But I would go with two of my favorite definitions here. The one is that design thinking is a human-centered approach to solving societal, economical, and other human problems, or seizing opportunities that arise as a result. In business terms, design thinking is a customer-centric approach to seizing opportunities or solving problems. In most, there are quite a number of frameworks out there that claims to be theories of frameworks for design thinking. But the most popular is a 5-pronged process that was popularized by an institution that unarguably helped establish design thinking or modern design thinking as we know it today, IDEO. There's a link to their website and to some of their resources at the end of this presentation. So there are five-pronged approaches as follows. They argue that you need to empathize with the customer or the user or the human at the center of the problem you are addressing or the opportunity you are seizing. In empathizing, there are quite a number of tools out there for us to use. The most popular are interviews, focus group discussions, and observation. Interviews, we sit down with our target audience and we ask them specific questions in the hope that their answers will provide us insights into what their real pain points are. In observing them, we sit down around them to see how they interact with their environment, with the challenge they are facing that we're trying to address, or with a prototype of our solution in their hands. We try to look at how they interact and all of that. A popular story goes that way back, whilst Google engineers were testing the Google landing page, that users looked at the screen and they were expecting more. They were expecting the enter button. And that was the reason why eventually Google included an enter button on the Google search page. I think that enter button has since disappeared again because, I mean, engineers would be engineers. They want to create what they want to create. And it's no longer a problem because the majority of the people are now used to not having the enter button. So in empathizing, we try to observe what our customers are doing with the product in the hope that we might glean unintended uses, unintended but beneficial uses being attempted, and that could provide insights into how best to expand the product suite or the product we are trying to introduce to the market. Post empathizing, post surveying the market, post interacting with our key audience, our key target or segments thereof, we need to then begin to establish the boundaries of our problem and or solution, and overlap this with the business's needs. Businesses need to make profits, that's for sure. Businesses also need to, potentially businesses have other key targets, impact and things like that. So it's important that we are not absolutely altruistic in our attempt to approach problem solving using design thinking by not considering what the benefits of taking these actions or otherwise would have for the business. So it's important that we situate the customer needs between the boundaries of our business needs or business aspirations as well. And once we define these boundaries, we step into a phase of ideating. In ideating, we come up with as many ideas as possible. The goal of ideation is not to come up with a single best idea, but to come up with as many ideas as possible. And we go back and forth between the definition and empathize stage or phase to understand which of our ideas would work. And we have a phase where we actually do this a lot, and that's the prototype phase, where we actually create prototypes of our response or our ideas to the problem or the opportunity at hand. Prototypes could range from low fidelity prototypes, which could be handwritten messages, if we're testing a messaging app, for example, or we're testing marketing communications. It could go to something between between low fidelity and high fidelity, which could be something as simple as an Excel model or similar. And then it could, or a wooden model of the product. Let's say we are trying to test the portability of a scanning device, or we want to test how people would interact with the small size of, let's say, a new type of mobile phone. We could create a wooden model of that and put this in the hands of people and see how they interact or play with this. And it could be high fidelity prototypes, which would almost look like and work like we expect the finished good to look like. These opportunities for creating high fidelity prototype exist today. If we're testing, we're trying to A/B test a website or similar, or we're trying to test a new feature in a mobile app, because it's easier today to create those capabilities than ever before. And there's no point creating low fidelity prototypes when the effort estimate or the effort required for a low fidelity prototype or a high fidelity prototype are similar. And we take this back to the customer. So the prototypes are not there for themselves or on their own. We need to take this back to the customer and see how the customer react to the prototypes. I deliberately used the currency symbol there, the euro symbol there, to say that our tests shouldn't be pure tests, shouldn't be laboratory type experiments alone. We can actually attempt to demand payment for those tests. We can invite beta users and charge them a fee for using the product. The rule of thumb is that early adapters wouldn't mind paying for those services, and you need to, or that product, and you need to keep early adopters close, because they probably are your best supporters and ambassadors. Now, I had simplified this flow, and in most instances where you see the design thinking, the same design thinking flow as I've presented, you find that it looks linear, but in truth, design thinking is never linear. You could jump between processes or between phases, as the case may be. In my experience, it's usual to go back from testing to ideating. Sometimes, whilst actually testing, you ideate again with your customers and you co-create new features or new capabilities. And usually, too, it's also always almost the case that we also go back from prototyping to defining our boundaries, because we find out during prototyping too that perhaps our boundaries are not as solid as we expect. They are too fluid and are subject to multiple definitions or descriptions, and we want to tidy that up, and we go back. And usually, sometimes too, in definition, we find out that we might have missed a key stakeholder segment, and we go back into empathize. And in the vast majority of instances, the difference between the empathized phase and the testing phase, the difference is really blurred, because you are also still observing the customers in the natural environment, or in an environment where you want them to use your product, and you are trying to see how they are interacting with the product and what the pain points are, or what additional opportunities exist for you out there. So what have I learned in adopting design thinking? What are the lessons I've got from the wild? One is that design thinking is and will always remain a team event. One person cannot really run a design thinking exercise on their own. It's usually a team effort. Another key discovery is that for design thinking to work well, for it to be truly customer centric, it's important that we have an open mind, and we also need to rely on as many research methods as possible, and I would explain why in a bit. And we need to ensure that we do not ignore our detractors. I'll also get into the details of that in a second. So it's a team event like no other, but I'm sure that it's similar to some of the things that you're used to as business analysts, who have had to wear multiple hats at different times, and sometimes at the same time on a single project. So usually I find that in a design thinking exercise, it's a relay, but the baton can be handed over to you multiple times. You are the product owner / business analyst. You are the philosopher, you are the designer, and it goes back and forth. And it's important that we embrace, for a successful exercise, it's important that we embrace the changing roles or the dynamic roles with both hands and without complaining. Team members usually have specific and ad hoc tasks. And I think that's normal for any project out there. At the beginning, there are clearly defined roles. But as stuff hits the fan, or as the wheels hit the road, a lot of things begin to move. And in order for things not to be dropped, we begin to pick up the slack wherever the opportunity arises. Sorry, I'm trying to move my screen. That moved too early. And I also always advocate that never be afraid to play the devil's advocate on your team, on your design thinking teams. When people work together for a long time, there's a risk of them falling into groupthink, and it's okay if you are the devil's advocate who question the conclusions. You might be the saving grace for that team. Open mind is required. We need to admit we all have biases, multiple biases even, and the usual guidance is that we need to know our biases and then ensure that we account for them in our decisions. Otherwise, our decisions would always be skewed towards our preferences. So we all have biases. At a minimum, we love our products that we've worked on. I mean, you spent weeks thinking about it. You've spent weeks crafting it. You've spent weeks going over the copy and all that. It's going to be tough for somebody to tell you it's not working, or for somebody to struggle to use it. You think they're dumb and all that, but that's usually not the case. So it's super important that we keep an open mind and ensure that our biases, as much as possible, does not cloud our judgment. We need to note what is said and done by the customers or the users of our products or our services. The risk is that we are quite close to this product more than anybody else, perhaps only as close as those who are on the team doing the product with us. So we tend to, in interacting with the customers or observing the customers interact with our product, we tend to want to put a spin on what is being said by the stakeholder or the customer. It's super important that we don't do that. If we do that, we are allowing our biases to influence our understanding of what's been said. It's super important that we note what the customer is saying or doing, and understand them as such, and see if there are opportunities or insights to glean. We should try our best not to explain away the surprises. If you expect people to click twice to get from a screen to another, and they click 10 times before they get there, or they don't even know they are supposed to click for whatever reason, it's super important that you don't start to say things like, yeah, it's because they weren't wearing their glasses, or it's because the room was dark and all that. You need to understand, you need to appreciate those surprises, things that you didn't expect to find, and go back to the drawing board and see if, besides the obvious reasons for those things, if there are underlying reasons, maybe your design choices, your design language, or the presentation thereof that is affecting the view of the customer or the user in ways other than we had expected. Look, great products have been built by carefully observing some of these things and not allowing the individual product manager or product owner or product team's biases to cloud the feedback from the customers. So yes, it's not what you're expecting, but it could actually be the bridge to success that you're actually seeking. So don't explain away the surprises, rather embrace them to see if there are hidden gems with which you can unlock additional value. So academics would agree, academics on this call will agree that there are multiple research methods, and each research method is not self-sufficient. If research methods are self-sufficient, perhaps the first self-sufficient research method would be the only research method out there. But indeed, there are research methods that are suited for different environments or for different tasks. But it's super important that we know that there is no single size that fits all when it comes to research methods. So it's super important that when you are researching your customer needs, that you consider as many research methods as possible, qualitative, quantitative, and the different subtypes within each broad groups. The other benefit of multiple methods of inquiry is that it can help correct for some of our own biases. Like I said earlier, we all have biases. Some of us have evolved to the point where we are aware of some of those biases, and some of us are still evolving, and some of us haven't even paid attention to some of these biases. But if we take a true scientific approach to finding out what opportunities really exist out there, or how our product is likely to affect society or affect our business's bottom line, and we use multiple methods, there's a chance that this will correct for our biases and will also correct for the inherent biases in each of the chosen methods. So when we look at things at an aggregate level, there's a chance that would correct for the individual anomalies in individual approaches to inquiry. So these are four of the top lessons I've learned and that I thought to share tonight. I would go through. So some of you might be wondering that, okay, so what are the examples? What are some of the examples of cases or places where design thinking have been used? So I like to tell the story of IDEO, spelled IDEO. At the opening of the conversation, I did mention that they are probably they help popularize the modern design thinking movement. IDEO is popular for creating the first computer mouse, and they did this for Apple in the early 80s. The technology existed. Xerox Spark had created the graphic user interface, and Apple and Windows were just going to launch products with that interface and all that. And there was a need for a pointing tool, a pointing and selecting tool. And IDEO worked using design thinking to create what today looks very ugly, but at the time looks very pretty appealing, functional tool, clicking and selection tool for Apple. A link to Tim Brown. Tim Brown is the CEO of IDEO. A link to his video explaining the process is included in this presentation. I would make sure that I understand that we don't circulate the presentations, but I'll make sure that all the links are shared with everybody who is on the call tonight, so we can dive deep into some of these things. So, but for me personally, I've got two recent experiences, and I'll go over them quickly without mentioning the names of the companies. Oh, sorry, I forgot to talk about not ignoring our detractors. So I'll quickly cover that. So that's another important lesson. Majority of us have interacted with one way or the other. We've interacted with the NPS, the Net Promoter Score. Usually it's two sets of questions. The first question asks if you recommend this product or service or this business to a friend or family. The answer is usually yes or no. And the second question is how happy are you with the service you've received, or how happy are you with the product? And then you have to score from 0 to 10, 0 being least happy, 10 being very excited. The use of the NPS in the back office is to say that those who have scored the service, the product, or whatever has been examined in 9 or 10 are fanatics, are fans of that product. They will do anything for that product. They are the kind of people that would go and create a GoFundMe account to ensure that that favorite business doesn't go under. And those that have scored the business or the product or the idea is 7 to 8 are those that are borderline convinced but not totally convinced. And you need to do everything in your power to convince them, to convert them into advocates. And they said that those that are 1 to 6 or 0 to 6, you shouldn't bother about them. They are detractors. They are haters. They don't love your business. They can go to places and all that. But in my experience, I've realized that the detractors hate your product for a reason. Of course, you will find in every area, everything you do, everywhere you go, you'll find people who are unreasonable. I think it's just the nature of the beast. But not everybody is unreasonable. If we put away our feeling of self-importance and all that, and we actually listen to people, we realize that there is a justification or a reason for the decisions they've taken. And sometimes in listening to our stakeholders that we should normally have ignored, we might find hidden gems that we can apply in evolving or improving our product and converting these zeros, ones, 4, 5, 6 into 7 and 8, and eventually into 9 and 10s. So I'll go to the use cases, some examples from my experience. I wouldn't mention names. So a business that needs to grow their data and voice unit sales in the youth segment, I was wondering what they need to do. They started to interact with young people who want fun, who want to be cool, who want colorful, and who want to learn in style. And following the design thinking principle, they arrived at this sweet spot, which does not satisfy all of the business needs or satisfy all of the young people's needs, but created a sweet spot of interaction between the two key stakeholders. So what we ended up with is a bouquet of never before tried offerings in the history of mobile network operators. We started to have educational data packages. We started to have entertainment only data packages. We started to have shareable vouchers, so I can share. I can buy entertainment vouchers and send it to my friend, so he can come up on WhatsApp and have a chat with me and all that. The upside for the business is that they did achieve the growth in the sale of voice and data units, leveraging vehicles created to cater to the needs of its audience. If the business was insistent on doing things the way they've always done it, they probably will lose this segment of the market to competitions or to their competitors who choose to wear the customer-centric or the customer-focused lens. Another rather interesting experience, a similar business needs to accurately track and report on the value of its asset base. And the asset base is managed or is interacted with most by engineers who also need to track and report on their work and in maintaining the outdoor asset base of a large multinational. A solution that was co-created was a multi-mode data collection platform that was easy to use and that caters to the nuances of engineers. Apologies to all engineers here. Engineers could be quirky, but no hard feelings. And on the back end, this data collection tool works seamlessly to also populate a complex but automated back office system that confirms the state of each asset and the remaining value, helping the finance ops team of this large multinational accurately track and report asset depreciations. Now, again, if the multinational feels that the engineers are best positioned to create their own tracking and reporting tool, and they empower them to do it, there's a chance that the solution that will be created will be quite suitable to the engineers, but will be useless to the rest of the business. And the same thing if the accountants were trusted to creating the tracking, the assets tracking and performance management tool, that they will create a tool that engineers will never understand how to use, but bringing the engineers and the accountants and the finance ops people into the same room and putting smart BAs like all of us on this call tonight together to guide them using the design thinking process. Iteratively, we arrived at that sweet spot. And at this point, I would open the floor for questions and for discussions. Lalita, I'll take your guidance on how to approach this.
I'll go through the questions. There's a few questions in the chat, and then you can respond to each one.
Okay.
Okay, the first one's from Ben. We don't always empathize with legal requirements. You have define and then ideate. And there's more for comment.
You don't even ideate with legal requirements, except you are becoming creative. You're trying to bend the rules. Legal requirements are legal requirements. Regulatory requirements are regulatory requirements. If they are what they are. If the government says you'll be fined if you collect or if you collect data from minors, there are no two ways around it. As soon as you realize that this is a minor, you have to request parental what's it called? Parental control. Sorry, parental consent, or you stop servicing that minor. So there is no. Yes, I agree. If it's a regulatory issue, it's straight-jacketed. You do nothing. You do what the regulator has said. Otherwise, you go show up your savings and get ready to pay penalties and fines.
Okay. Next one's from Sean. During the empathize stage, what do you consider as the best approaches to understand the customer problem situation?
I don't think there's a best approach. I think you have to find whatever works. Three good approaches are interviewing the customer, but that, like I said, every research methodology or method has got its own biases. So in interviewing a customer or a user, I can already see a language challenge, especially if the interviewer is a bit more educated than the person being interviewed. So there could be challenges there. Another tool that one can use is observation, and I think that might be a very excellent tool in that you are within the natural environment of the target audience, and you're watching how they are interacting and relating with, the product or the problem or the challenge or the opportunity that you're interested in, and you are taking notes. The challenge with that is, again, we are likely to look at the things we're seeing from our own point of reference. So that would mean that if, for example, you are trying to build your target audience is a different economic group as you. You might not understand why they stayed longer, they waited longer to get the extra £5 when normally you would have walked away from the extra £5 because for you time is more precious than £5. There's a bus you need to catch or there's a plane you need to catch and all that. So there's a chance that if we're not careful, if we don't recognize our biases and account for them, we might shade our observation with those biases, and we might end up with skewed conclusions. So I think as we evolve our practice, our research practice, and our design thinking practice in general, we'll learn from our experiences, and we'll find what works and what doesn't work. So it's tough to be prescriptive.
A comment from Ben on that was that an option is customer journey and scenarios overlay with possible tech or new features applied to it.
I agree. We can try that too. I agree.
Okay.
It's just also important that we keep an open mind, and we account for shortcuts that customers take in the customer journey. So it's not compulsory that we go through all of the phases of discovery and into advocacy. We need to take note of the shortcuts and see what is responsible for those shortcuts and leverage it. Again, that's why I said earlier that if we put aside our biases and we embrace the surprises we see, that we might be in for a good surprise ourselves, in that we might discover hidden gems in our products that customers are using in ways that's other than we have designed them or we had intended. And sometimes those end up being the key feature of the product. But imagine if we hadn't been patient enough to make that observation.
Okay. The next one's from Liesel. I'm new to design thinking and attended a course where the design thinking for growth was followed. I'm using the approach on a new product that we want to develop, and I'm finding it challenging but interesting. It would be interesting to learn from others' experiences. What resources would you recommend for a beginner?
Look, so two key sets of resources. So I myself and a few friends are putting together a virtual learning academy. We've called it billionhq.com, and we are putting together a set of materials on different topics. I don't want to advertise here. We haven't paid for advertisements, but yeah, it will be worthwhile to check them out. But again, in the references and resources section of this presentation, I've been kind enough to include, if I say it myself, to include a few resources that I think are quite thorough in addressing the foundations of design thinking. But I know that Harvard University has got a ton of materials. I know that MIT Design School has got a ton of materials on design thinking. And I also know that interactiondesign.org has a course of design thinking. I took that course a few years ago for beginners, and I think it's worth every time I spent on it. And IDEO, the guys I mentioned earlier that helped popularize the modern design thinking movement, has got a ton of premium level design thinking materials that they offer for free. So those are some of my recommendations. But above all, I would say stay in touch, and then we can keep the conversation going.
Thanks, Olu. There was lots of to and fro about what does NPS stand for, but I think the answer was given between the chats.
Net Promoter Score.
Yes.
Yes, and there are variations like ENPS, Employee Net Promoter Score. Some people say CNPS, Customer Net Promoter Score. I think it's just a way for Net Promoter Score advocates to differentiate between the sources of the Net Promoter Score. And I also think that it's also useful in seeing how your people, the staff of the business, feel about the company compared to how the customers feel as well. And if there are gaps, for you to then start to investigate those gaps and see how you can bridge those gaps, especially if the gaps provide opportunities for improvement. And there are quite a number of theories around how the way we make our people feel affects the way they service our customers and vice versa.
The next one is from Cody.
Okay.
Is it safe to assume that if you're using design thinking to solve a problem or complete a project, you don't need a budget? As the DT Ideate stage encourages the generation of a variety of solution ideas without regard to constraints, whether realistic or not in terms of budget, as long as the customer's pain concerns are addressed.
So I think I addressed that in the presentation when we spoke about defining the boundaries of the problem and how we're going to solve it. That is where things like your reality as a business also comes to play. Do you have all of the skills to solve this problem? Do you need to insource or outsource some of the skills required? How much money do you have available to solve this problem? Is this problem or this opportunity the biggest? Or does it promise the biggest return on investment? So all of those things you need to do in the definition stage. And there's nothing wrong in using tools like IRR, internal rate of return, payback time, and those kind of tools to prioritize which problem you solve for. And even in solving for those problems, in determining which of the numerous ideas you go with. Also, in defining in factoring your reality, that could also be the reason why you go ask for more budget when you realize that the original budget allocated to this project wouldn't even scratch the surface based on the things you found in your Empathize phase. So again, it's possible to run these phases simultaneously and to reach faster conclusions. So it's tough to attempt to do it linearly. If you attempt to do it linearly, then you begin to have problems of, okay, this is how big the customer challenge is, and this is how big the budget to address it should be. But unfortunately, this is how small it is, so maybe we shouldn't do this anymore, or maybe we should go rob a bank and do this. But if it's iterative, we can go back and see if there are smaller, low-hanging, like business people say, low-hanging fruits that we can address with some of our easy-to-fund ideas, and that could be the basis of proving that there's something there, and that business should allocate more budget. So it's super important that we pay attention to the definitions. The definition stage actually helps set clear boundaries or restraints to how creative we can really be in solving the problem. And the whole idea of design thinking is not to solve only for the customer problem. It is to solve for the customer problem within the realities of the business. So it's important that we bear that in mind.
Okay. The next one is from Tsepo. In your experience, what are best practices to align design with business? That is, what are key strategies to talk the talk and walk the walk with business partners?
It's the whole presentation.
Mm-hmm.
The whole presentation. Understand that it's a team event. Understand that you play multiple roles. Understand that you're not going to get everything you want every time. Keep an open mind. Keep your stakeholders close. Run small experiments to convince them that what you're saying has got value. Don't stick to your guns 100% of the time. Try and learn if you're try and test your ideas, see if what you're saying is really valid or is really valuable or would actually generate the results you are anticipating. learn from stakeholders, adopt as many research methods as possible. If what you believe is the best approach is too expensive to use, are there smaller approaches you can take? Are there cheaper tools you can use rather than build a powerful high fidelity prototype? Can you build a cheaper low fidelity one to test your ideas? So pretty much that. So it's about stakeholder management. It's about being open-minded. It's about being honest. It's about being humble. It's about everything that I've said in this presentation.
Yeah. Nolwasi asks, what is the best approach to convince business users about minimum viable products?
It's to create the minimum viable product. The taste of a pudding, it's in the tasting. I hope I said that correctly. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Is to create the MVP. So look, I support I support rebels who are convinced. So the fancier name for rebels are entrepreneurs, but sometimes entrepreneurs are not supported and they have to go out on their own and create things. Who within ethical boundaries and within legal boundaries break protocols to prove their point. So I'm not saying take a gun to the office and put it to the head of the CEO and tell him if he doesn't sign this document, you're not going to leave him or you're going to shoot him and all that. No, I'm not saying do that. I'm saying um, if you realize that you can create a slice of the product as quickly as possible using, say, remnant artifacts or tools that have been used for previous products or previous projects, and then do it. You know, if you feel that creating a wooden model of a product would help situate your ambitions before your key stakeholders, then do it. And if you fail, you've learned a lesson. You've learned how not to do things. And if you succeed, then you've convinced business that you were onto something. So if the environment is enabling enough for you to break some of the rules or the protocols without crossing ethical or legal boundaries, then I'd say take a chance. Sometimes all you need to do is go over your boss's head to somebody else who is more powerful, more authoritative, and who might listen. But again, all of this can backfire. So you need to also consider your own sense of safety and how much risk you're willing to take. But the honest truth is that you cannot convince people of an MVP in abstraction. Sometimes they need to see what you're talking about. And a good book that explains this is The Mafia Bomber, written by Malcolm Gladwell. There's a good chapter of it where he talked about incendiary bombing. I'm not going to talk a lot more about that. But it was what changed World War II for the Allied forces. And it actually took people, generals in the U.S. Army Air Forces. At the time, there was no U.S. Air Force. It took generals seeing with their own eyes the impact of incendiary bombs for them to approve or authorize its use. This is what it is. So MVPs are MVPs. They need to be placed in people's hands. They need to interact with it. They need to see it. MVPs are beyond ideas. They are actual things that people can interact with. So you need to find a way of creating it. Thank you.
Leanne wants to know, how does one plan, estimate, and track solving a problem when using a design thinking approach?
Maybe you cannot. Maybe you cannot. Maybe you'll be able to do that as the practice matures. And that could also be the reason why design thinking is not as popular as other solutioning methods out there. So maybe you cannot. Maybe that's tough. And maybe you can, in definition, you can decide that these are the boundaries. We are not going to spend more than 2 months on this project, come rain and shine, and we're not going to spend more than 2 million rands on this project, come rain and shine. At the 2 million rand mark, we call it quits if we don't have results, if we don't think we are close to results. So it requires a lot of intuition. It requires a lot of intuition. It requires a lot of constant check on reality to see what is still possible and how far you can go. Again, design thinking is not a a license to do anything and do everything. It's as much a disciplined approach to doing things as many of the other straight-jacketed approach to doing things. It's just that design thinking puts the customer smart bank center of all of the processes, of the process or the initiatives. So it's not just you in your little corner office deciding what the customer needs. It's you actually engaging with the customer to understand what their needs are and ensuring that this is adequately catered for.
Okay. Before I go to the next one, I just want to remind everyone, I've shared a link in the chat. If you could please click on it and complete the survey. Thanks. Okay, the next one is from, I think it's Maile. Legal aspects or requirements can be incorporated in design concepts such as rules, though. So in a way, they can influence design thinking to be more compliant. I think this was around the original question that started off the conversation. And then XT, during Ideate stage, how do you ensure you come up with real ideas as opposed to wishes? And how do you test or select innovative ideas?
So that's why I said that it's a team sport. The general approach to ideation is to ensure that you generate as many ideas as possible without any judgment. And when the entire team is spent, then you begin to group the ideas into similar ideas. You bunch them into similar ideas. And then when you go back into reviewing the defined problems and your reality or define opportunity or problem and your reality, you begin to see which of the ideas wouldn't work. And sometimes the ideation process also involves the customer or the user, the end user, and they can point out, they can tell you already what they are not going to touch with a meter long pole, and they can tell you already what they think would meet their needs and all of that. But again, what they say is that people say all kinds of things, but when you put them through their paces, then you see that they do all kinds of different things. So that's why it's important that you select some of the ideas and prototype them. And that's why it's also important that you don't go for the most expensive prototyping method in testing out your ideas. But the truth is that, nobody knows. We are all smarter in retrospect, right? The BlackBerry executives were adamant that a phone without keyboard would never fly. Today, BlackBerry is no more, but everybody carries a phone in their pocket that has no keyboard, that has no physical keyboard. But at the time, Apple was taking a huge risk. I'm sure maybe they've got a very good cash position, and if things are turned out awfully, maybe they probably wouldn't have. They probably would have thought they would have dealt with that as tuition for college or whatever, an expensive learning opportunity. But the truth is that we are all smarter in retrospect. So the best thing is to select. Go with your guts, go with an aggregate view of the team, select some of the ideas and test them out. And if they don't work, you go back to the drawing board. God help you, you are not out of budget. If you're out of budget, well. And as you adopt design thinking for varied problems, you become all the smarter and will be able to smell a crap idea from a distance. Apologies for my choice of words. And a good one from a distance as well. But to be honest, it's on day one, it's tough to pick out the gems out of all of the rocks you are presented with. You have to test them.
Okay. Last two here. One from Sean. The feedback loop is important. I assume the feedback loops example, moving from testing to ideate, is required when expected outcomes are not met. However, where slight changes are needed, is there a need to return to ideate or maybe return to prototyping stage instead?
Look, again, there's no best practice. The team would decide. The general idea, though, is to stay as close to the customer or the key stakeholders as possible, and to test and test and test throughout, and look back as many times as possible. They say a stitch in time saves nine. If you pick up a challenge or an issue with a solution, before you have ordered a million copies of the item or the product or the solution. You are better off than trying to fix that issue after you've placed it in the hands of people. Well, with some tech product, it's possible to fix issues into perpetuity. Apple and Android devices continue to get updated to fix bugs that were introduced either at manufacture or at launch or along with the last update. But there are products that a total recall will be required. Takata, the airbag manufacturer, they realized that there was a fundamental problem with the airbag systems they've supplied, and the recall process actually not ran them out of business. You don't want to make such a huge mistake if you can pick that up using feedback loops. So yeah, but again, it's all boils down to the practitioners, their experience and their comfort with feedback loops or otherwise.
And then the last one is from Susan. I find it challenging to balance the time required to apply a variety of DT tools with tight project deadlines.
So yeah, maybe I should have said this upfront. Not all projects are suited or are suitable for any particular approach to solving problems. So if you've got tight deadlines, then maybe you just need to go with your guts and create a product that you think the customer needs. And again, that's the defined stage of design thinking also caters to that. But again, as teams mature or as enterprises adopt design thinking, so IBM has got a concept called enterprise design thinking, similar to how we have centralized project management offices in most businesses today, or how we have business analysis center of excellence, where practitioners don't need to create artifacts from ground up any longer. There are existing knowledge and there are existing tool sets or resources or even individuals that practitioners can rely on to get things done faster than ever before. So instead of going to a community to understand how they're going to interact with your low water toilet system, there's a chance that a team that has already done a low water shower system has learned how the community interacts with that, and you can leverage off that knowledge. So as design thinking becomes pervasive in an organization, it becomes easier and faster to actually leverage it in solving customer problems and enterprise problems than ever before. So yeah, if you are contending with tight deadlines, I believe that you have to select a product delivery or product management approach that best suits that reality. And where you have the luxury of time, you can build out a full-on design thinking initiative. But again, design thinking will save you a lot more. In retrospect, will save you a lot more than, because now you're building a product that is fit for purpose, that is fit for market, that sits at the intersection of product markets fit, as opposed to finishing up a product on time, on budget, on scope, or within scope, and there are no sales. Nobody wants to buy it. You're back at the drawing board anyways, and time is also still passing. There are quarterly reports or quarterly deadlines or financial reports to meet or targets to meet. Yeah, so it might be worth taking an ambidextrous approach where some projects. So ambidextrous, you test out design thinking on some projects where you are comfortable, and you keep to the process principle approaches that you have come to trust on other projects, and compare the results. And as you become more comfortable with design thinking, you can shift more projects to design thinking approaches, and less projects to the more the approaches that you're more comfortable with.
Thanks a lot for that, Olu. I just want to say thank you for taking time and spending your evening with us and giving us such insightful information. I definitely think everyone's going to want to keep in touch and get more information and leverage off your knowledge. To everyone else, if you could please take some time and complete that survey for Ollie on Menti. And please look out for the recordings of these will be on the IIBA's ASA's YouTube channel, and you can always follow us on or email us on Durban@southafrica.iiba.org. Thanks everyone for all your time, and have a good evening. And once again, thank you so much, Olu, for a wonderful presentation.
I'm grateful. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity and the privilege. And have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.